Welcome to Astro Talk, today with a very special guest from England, Professor Charles Burnett. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. And we start with the site we have prepared on our special site, astrotalk.vonabisw.de. We have a special site, and there is the copyright to start with. I am only have the right to publish our talk with Professor Burnett, uncut and unedited on freely accessible video platforms, no paywalls, and on my homepages. My guest, Professor Burnett, has the right to shorten, edit, or add to the MP4 file as he wishes and to publish it on his on websites and video platform as far as he likes. Is that okay with you?
That is okay, yes.
Okay, Professor Charles Burnett, a short introduction. Born in September 1951, I'm 2 years older than you, so we are the same generation. Professor Charles Burnett is one of the leading authorities on the transmission of knowledge from the Arabic-speaking world into medieval Europe, especially in science, philosophy, and astrology. He got a BH, he was BA student in Cambridge University, 1969 till May 1972. He completed a bachelor's degree in the Classical Tripos at University of Cambridge in May 72. He earned his PhD in modern and medieval languages at Cambridge in June 1976. He then became a junior research fellow at St. John's College, Cambridge from 1976 to 1979 and so on. Professor Burnett, you were born in East Africa.
I wasn't actually born there. No, I went to East Africa when I was 4 years old.
Okay, with your father who was a missionary.
Well, he taught in a missionary school. It was called the Alliance High School because it was an alliance of three missionary societies, the Methodist, the Anglican, and the Presbyterian. But he wasn't, well, he certainly wasn't a theologian or he wasn't a preacher himself, but he was a teacher of geography, if you like.
So you were born in England then?
I was born in Oxford by chance because
You were
um,
born in Oxford and you became a Cambridge student. We have to talk about
well,
it later.
yes, I
Okay.
abandoned my Oxford
When you
origin.
were 4 years old, you came to East Africa. Where in East Africa exactly?
Well, this school, which was a boarding school in the countryside, was in a place called Kikuyu, which was 16 miles away from the capital of Kenya, Nairobi. So
Okay.
Nairobi was our big city.
And you mentioned in one of your videos or texts that the confrontation with the culture there had an impact on you, especially for your Arabic studies. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it was only later when I started learning or going back to Arabic, when I started my PhD in 1972, that I realized that I already knew a lot of the words in Arabic. Because of the Swahili language, which was the lingua franca of the Europeans and the Africans in Kenya at the time. Because Swahili, in fact, is a Bantu language, but with an Arabic vocabulary, because it was used, it came into being as a language of communication along the East African coast for trading with mainly with Arabic traders, Arabic-speaking traders. Swahili, as it were, was the language we spoke in our house in Kenya to the boys, as we called them, the servants who inevitably were working in the house and in the garden.
So you were fluent in the language.
No, I wasn't fluent, no,
Oh, okay.
but I knew a lot of phrases.
Okay.
Yes,
How long did you stay in East Africa?
well, for 4 years.
So you were 8 years old when you left East
When
Africa.
we returned to England,
Oh,
yes.
your family returned to England.
The whole family returned to England when I was 8, partly because of my schooling. They wanted me to go to an English secondary school.
When you say secondary school in England, it's very different from German
Yes,
relations. You have these public schools which are private, and you have the public
yeah,
schools which are
absolutely.
not private.
Always very
What sort of school did
confusing.
you attend?
Well, then I was in England for 2 years in a primary school, in fact, two different primary schools. And then we were living in Manchester, and we moved to Manchester partly because there's a very good state school, well, it's half state, half private, actually, called the Manchester Grammar School, state supported. So I had a scholarship at the Manchester Grammar School, which was the best school in the area, and I was there from what 1961 to 69. Yeah,
That means that from that school you went straight to Cambridge.
I went straight to Cambridge. Yes, other
And
people.
now we
Say,
come to the question.
yes,
You were born in Oxford, and
yes.
some people do know about the relationship between Oxford University and Cambridge University.
Uh,
Can you give our viewers a general elaboration on the relationship between Oxford people and Cambridge people, and the rowing contest and all that, and then why you, as an Oxford-born guy, chose Cambridge?
Well, first of all, it was only by chance I was born in Oxford. My father was teaching at a school in the countryside, several miles away from Oxford, and the Oxford Radcliffe Hospital was the nearest big hospital for me to be born in, as it were. So we didn't live in Oxford. So
Okay.
I don't feel I have a sort of affiliation to Oxford in that way. As for Cambridge, my father went to the same college, St John's College in Cambridge.
Oh, okay.
And the Manchester Grammar School had a special arrangement with the same college, St John's College, for a fellowship, a scholarship rather. And I got this scholarship called a Patent Scholarship, which means that my parents didn't have to pay for me. I mean, those were the good days when one didn't pay university fees anyway. So, yeah.
Uh, when you talk about John College, that is one of the most prestigious colleges in Cambridge, right?
Well, that's to yes. The only other contender, I suppose, is Trinity College, which is slightly bigger than and more wealthier than St John's College. But what St John's College is also very famous for is its college choir, the music there in the choir, in which it's a rival to King's College, Cambridge. And I felt very happy to be in such an atmosphere. Yeah.
When you arrived at St. John's College for your Bachelor of Arts degrees in the classics, Tripos, I think you call that
It was
in,
Classics Tripos,
yes.
yes. Three
Uh,
years of Latin and Greek.
what is a tripos?
Well, a tripos is a little stool with three legs, of course. But it's became the name of the of the series of exams which we take in the process of 3 years, because originally the examinee would sit on a little three-legged stool whilst he was being examined, so that name just stuck. And so we call tripos. I mean, other people might call it degree, a classics degree. But in Cambridge, maybe in Oxford too, they call it the classics tripos.
Okay.
Yes.
When you were in college, were you already aware of astrology as a field, as a subject, as an interesting practice in England in that times? We are now in 1969. This is before
Yes.
the renaissance of the astrology in England, of the old traditional astrology. How about yourself? When did the word astrology came into your life?
Well, it came in rather late actually in my study because I was completely unaware. Well, I had I knew the popular ideas about astrology, but I was completely unaware of a history of astrological sources in the ancient world and so on. Because first of all, I was studying a full range of subjects belonging to the classics tripos, from literature through to you could say some philosophy, history, and linguistics. I specialized in linguistics. But then when I started doing my PhD, that was when I first became fascinated by the transmission of Arabic works into Latin. Um, and and well, we're going to talk about this a bit later anyway, but it was because of the prevalence of astrology amongst the first works to be translated from Arabic into Latin that I, whether I liked it or not, I had to become interested in astrology. But I did become interested in astrology, um, but it was through entirely through my study, rather than through a personal interest in astrology, which going back any further earlier in my life.
In your publication of 1982 of Hermann of Carinthia De Essentis,
Yes.
in the preface, you write, "My interest in Hermann of Carinthia's De Essentis began when Peter Dronke lent me his copy of Charles Haskin's Studies in the History of Medieval Science soon after my graduation from Cambridge University. I was immediately intrigued by Haskin's description of the work and the combination of Latin Platonism and Arabic science." That would mean that you started to get acquainted with Hermann of Carinthia in 1977?
No, 1972.
You mean after your BA, your
After my
bachelor?
BA degree, yes,
So
yes.
basically, we have a time frame that in 1972, 73, you became acquainted with the work of Hermann of Carinthia. And in one of our email correspondence, I asked you whether you took Hermann of Carinthia as a blueprint for yourself, and you answered obviously. Now, now, Hermann of Carinthia in your book, it's very interesting to read, is interesting in two facets. His work of transferring knowledge from the Arabic world to the Latin world in one
Yes.
case, and secondly, he has a certain Platonic worldview. When you say, obviously, I took him as a blueprint for my own life, do you mean both aspects? Because obviously, Hermann of Carinthia did transfer knowledge from Arabic to Latin, and did the same with your work.
Well, yes. I mean, to extrapolate a little bit, what I meant, I suppose, is that Herman, unlike many translators who simply translated from one language into another, he really took to heart and developed what he discovered in another language, in another culture, and incorporated into his own worldview. And what the text that I edited, that De Essentis, I mean, from its very title, you can see it's about what is essential in the world, about the essences, about things that really exist. Um, and um, and he uses for this, first of all, his classical training, especially he was especially influenced by the one work of Plato that had already been translated from Greek into Latin. That was his Timaeus, which is a cosmology. Well, the first half is a cosmology. The second half is all about man and what man is all about. So first of all, he used and he knew very well this classical philosophical cosmological tradition, but then you see he just translated the biggest, most important Arabic work on astrology, the what we call the Great Introduction to Astrology by Abu Ma'shar.
Which would be comparable to
Which is
this.
quite a recent publication, yes, in two volumes. So you can show the second
Yeah,
volume.
yeah.
But but this was a magnificent work, partly well, because not only well, let's say the main purpose of Abu Mashar was to give the reasons for astrological doctrine, and those reasons were based on Aristotelian natural science, and he gives the reasons for everything, you know, for the why the planets have particular houses, i.e., are assigned to particular signs of the zodiac, why the length of what are called the planetary years, and every single astrological doctrine has a rational reason. Some and Abu Mashra, you see, builds up his own cosmology on astrological principles. One could say. I mean, the first principle is that the heavenly bodies, in their regularity and their quintessence, are responsible for all the changes in the sublunary world. And all that the wise man or the student is required to do is to work out how these influences work, and on the one hand, explain or describe the visible influences like the moon on the tides and so on. But on the other hand, having known the details of the influences of the planets and the signs of the zodiac, then to be able to predict the future. So that
Okay.
and Herman, he obviously very much admired this very scientific work that he translated. And he incorporated so much of this information into his work on the essences. And he realized, I suppose, and developed the idea that there was a kind of common mentality behind Abu Mashar and the Latin Plato, the Timaeus, which one could call Platonism.
Okay. Now back to the question. You are obviously a blueprint reincarnation of transferring knowledge from Arabic to English and Latin.
Yes.
But what about the second part? Is Hermann of Carinthia a blueprint of your personal cosmology?
Uh, maybe. Um, Well, I think one is more inclined to say that you are not influenced in the way, I mean, concerning the scientific construction of the world. I mean, nowadays we know very well so many aspects of what the cosmos looks like. But what one is influenced by is the spiritual aspects of the cosmology. I mean, the one reason, of course, and this is quite universal, but for studying the world around us, is to get an idea of the importance of the glory of God, the Creator. And this is very much in Herman's mind as well. But there's also the idea that there are two levels of reality, that we have the superficial level, which we observe around us all the time, but at a deeper level, there is what might call the spiritual level, or the hidden or the occult level, which is also natural. It's still part of the nature of us, of what is around us, but it is something that we have to learn to enter, to appreciate. Um, and um, and the this is probably going a little bit too far, but the scientific quest to go beyond the obvious to the hidden um, is akin to the religious quest of becoming closer to God. I mean, what is hidden, what is spiritual within all creation is, well, not only is it the creation of God, but it also brings the soul of man closer to God. So there's this idea of spiritual development, which is innate to the kind of cosmology that Hermann of Carinthia, drawing on his Platonic sources and his Arabic sources, and this is the kind of cosmology that he proposes.
Okay, so basically, we have the situation which all the researchers of astrology in the history are confronted with. They dive into texts and they do a lot of work and they invest a lot of time. For example, Stefan Heilen in Osnabrück writing his Habilitationsschrift Hadriana Genitura. That
Yes.
was a
Another
project
two
of
volumes. Yes.
that has 2 volumes as well.
Uh,
And always the researcher is confronted with this situation that he is, as you explained very nicely, confronted with very intriguing and very deep-going thoughts of the authors of the Arabic world. Um, it had its effect on you. If you look at the scene of of your colleagues in the world, is that what you experienced with your own life and your own developing how you think about these things? Is that typical for the researcher that he get sort of infected, the virus takes place in the life, or is that, or are you more a minority and the most researchers don't touch this area?
Well, that's an interesting question and a difficult one to answer because I'm sure there's so many different reasons for doing research, and people react in in the quality of their life in different ways. A lot of people, and I suppose part of me is exactly this person who really just wants to find out about things. Um, and once you've found out about things, you want to tell other people about what you've discovered. And you're always wanting to make connections and see developments in ideas. And the well, one of the most interesting things, ways of doing this is to look how an idea has passed from one language into another and what kind of transformation it has gone through in the process of transmission from one language to another. Um, and a lot of people, well, I might say, including myself, would consider doing well, reading works written in the past and looking at connections between different languages. Consider this as an enjoyable way of life in itself, without any further aim. I mean, it's much better than working in an office, signing documents or drawing up
Yeah.
documents all the time. And it is an exciting thing to do, and this is also what one tries to convey, or one does convey to one's students, that it is a worthwhile and let's say a soul enhancing occupation to understand and to appreciate what other people's ideas, whether in the present or in the past. Um, I wouldn't put myself into the position of a preacher, making these works that I edit canonical works to be read in a religious context. Um, and one can separate one's spiritual life, as it were, from one's academic life. But I think when I look at my other colleagues too, fortunately I'm in a research institute, the Warburg Institute, where we are all we do teach, but we teach postgraduate students who are more mature, who are doing MAs or PhDs, but we have more time than in a normal university post, and to do pursue our own research as well, and and I think that the common denominator of these myself and my colleagues is that we really enjoy discovering new things, or finding ways of presenting interesting facts from the past in new ways, and reaching new audiences. Um, so, the research is very much, or participating in research is very much an aim of its own. And whether it makes us better people, I'm not sure. But there are people, as I've already said, of the past, whom one does feel great sympathy and almost identity with. And for me, that is
Okay.
Corinthia. Um, and there are people whom I find more difficult to understand as personalities, as friends. Yeah, but that's another one. Yes,
That's another one. I was wondering if you did research on Adelard of Bath, you organized a symposium in the Warburg about it. Um, when I read, coming back to Hermann of Carinthia, I read in the book by edited by Benjamin Dykes, the Book of the Nine Judges,
yeah.
traditional
Oh,
horary astrology, and there he on page 2 he mentioned that in 1977 you had the belief that the three judges can be dated to before 1151. And I'm mentioning this because I had a video of yourself where you were talking about the nine judges. You have a sort of positive attitude to this nine judges book in Arabic Times. I was wondering, how do you manage to stay course, not to be engulfed to becoming an astrologer instead of a university professor? And how you manage. You are very famous for your willingness to take PhD students who have been practicing astrologers, Dorian Gisela Greenbaum, Helena Avila, Luis Ribeiro, and other people. Um, how do you personally stay course, not to be engulfed in the abyss of astrology and becoming a practicing astrologer in your life? And how do you steer your PhD students to be on this academic objective path and not deviate from it?
well, the latter is not too difficult because there are so many norms and rules to follow if you're writing an academic book. You've got to give your references, you've got to be quite clear as to what is your own opinion and what opinion you're taking from another source. Um, and as I say before, you should not adopt a preaching attitude when you're writing, say this is true, you must believe what I'm saying, and you will be a better person. You will find redemption or salvation. So writing an academic book, I mean, one could say that this is a rather dry, unspiritual thing to be doing, and that is much better to put your knowledge into practice. And in the field of astrology, that is there is, of course, a very close relationship between these theoretical manuals, like Abu Masha's Great Introduction and the Nine Judges, um, and the actual practice of astrology, to the extent that we can recreate it for these earlier periods. And Helena Avalar, of course, did this very well in writing a thesis and then publishing a book entirely on horoscopes, collections of horoscopes by this person called Simon Bella, which just showed how astrology was put into practice. Um, but there is a whole well, you could say that most of the literature, i.e., most of the books that I'm reading and looking at the translations of, are on the theoretical level. And so you yourself can remain on the theoretical level um, um, without actually trying to put this theory into practice in your own experience. Um, I've never felt a necessity. I mean, I've been so fascinated mm, by the philosophy, by the opinions of these. Um, some of them are astrologers themselves, but I haven't ever felt the necessity to practice myself.
Did you ever look at your own horoscope?
Oh yes, frequently, yes,
Ah,
yeah.
okay. So,
But
so
not yet as a matter of interest, rather than
okay,
curiosity, as it were,
okay,
rather than guiding my life by
okay.
it.
Okay, so we can leave Hermann of Corinthia as a blueprint of Professor Charles Burnett. And the second book is, as mentioned, Adelard of Bath, which seems to be important for you. Why?
Well, again, I discovered Adelard quite early on, during my research, I suppose, in the early 70s. And, well, the first thing that spiked my interest was that he came from a part of England where my own family comes from, at my grandfather's generation, and that is Bristol and Somerset and indeed Bath, a little village called Burnett, which is between Bristol and Bath. Um, so I felt an identity, as it were, with him as a real Englishman, but an Englishman living at a time when there was a combination, a coming together of at least three languages in his area. I mean, there was the Anglo-Saxon, there was the Norman French coming in as a new language, as it were, for the area. And there was the Welsh just round the corner from where he lived, so a Celtic language. Um, and not to mention the languages of learning like Latin and Arabic. And one thing I discovered, I suppose, was that people were actually using Arabic in their teaching in Bath as students of Adelard who had been to the Near East and had picked up not only the language but brought Arabic books back to Bath, where he was making translations of them. Um, the other thing is Adelard, I mean, he might have practiced astrology to a certain extent, but what he was concerned about was um, a complete education. And that complete education, but it's manifest in his work called On the Same and the Different, which takes up a phrase from Plato's Timaeus, in fact, that the whole of creation is made by blending strips of same and strips of different. We can go into more detail about that. But that goes through all of the seven liberal arts, the mathematical arts of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and then the trivial arts of logic, grammar, and dialectic. And these in themselves complete or consist are the constituents of philosophy. But then in his translations from Arabic, he has this other program which is entirely, you could say, entirely mathematical, because it starts with Euclid's Elements, with geometry. It goes through, because there's a work by a student of his on arithmetic, Arabic, or Hindu Arabic arithmetic, one must say, because it's doing arithmetic as the Indians did. It has and he wrote a work on the abacus, which was the main instrument for doing arithmetic, for doing your calculations. He wrote notes on music, but above all, he wrote about astronomy. He translated astronomical tables. He wrote the abbreviation, indeed, of Abu Masha's great introduction to astrology, the abbreviation made by Abu Masha himself. Um, and then, but the culmination, one might say, of this program, starting from the elements of Euclid, and going through, well, the whole of the quadrivium, going into and focusing on astronomy, and the culmination is a work on magic. But what you could say is called astral magic,
Okay.
how to make talismans. Um, and this manifests not only the idea um, that in order to be an effective member of the community, you had to not only know um, the theory of how the world functions and so on, but you've also got to know the practice, be able to practice. And here,
Okay.
I mean, he wrote an astrological text as well, which describes how to be an astrologer. But the culmination really is how to change things for the better, one would hope, by making, constructing talismans and bringing down the influence of the stars onto the talisman that you're
But
constructing.
you do realize, even though we had this discussion with Otto Neugebauer about the rigid subjects in the
Yes.
50s, even in 1980s, to publish an in-depth book about Adela of Bath, you are bordering very, very dangerously of risking your reputation if you do too much of that, or isn't that the case?
Well, I'd already got a tenured position by then, so
Ah, okay. Uh,
no,
now,
no, no, no. I don't think that's the case.
okay,
Not at an academic level, anyway. No,
okay,
yeah. Sorry, I was going to say that the second element is in this curriculum of Adelaide's is that you start off with the concrete universe around you, the one that you can see. But then in the last work, which is, I didn't say a translation of an Arabic text by Thabit ibn Qurra on images, i.e., on talismans, you are entering the spiritual world. Um, and in fact, this work in Adelaide's translation includes prayers to the spirits of the planets and so on, and is you're actually um, taking under your own control spiritual forces in the universe. Mm.
okay. Um, what intrigued me was I know the novel The Medicus and the film The Medicus is available. And in this novel, it's described how an English young boy goes to Baghdad and learns with Ibn Avicenna about medicine. I was wondering, these people we are talking about, Hermann of Carinthia and Abelard of Bath, they are close to that time frame. How did they get into the Arabic worlds and were not stoned?
Well, again, that's an interesting point. um, I like to think it's probably a little bit too optimistic, but that scholars um, were always communicating with each other in spite of religious and political boundaries. In fact, in the case of Adelard, he was always going through places which had recently been conquered from the Arabs.
Oh, okay.
Sicily, Norman Sicily. He was there for some 20 years after the actual conquest by the Normans of what had been under Arabic control for 3 centuries. And then he probably accompanied the first Crusaders at the very end of the um, 11th century, 1099 or so.
So he
And
didn't
so
live under Arabic rule in
he
any
didn't.
time.
He didn't. No, no. And
Okay.
he does mention that he visited well Tarsus and Mopsuestia, which were temporarily under Crusader control in the Principality of Antioch. So he was probably safe from that point of view. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, he's not like Richard the Lionheart who got captured and
Yeah,
way to the
yeah.
to the Middle East. Yes.
Okay, back to your biography.
Mm.
You became a junior research fellow at St. John's College,
Yes,
and this is where you did the Hermann of Carinthia work, I would suppose. Is that
I
correct?
suppose so. Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
And then you became a senior research fellow at the
Yeah,
Warburg in
yeah.
1979 to 82, and
Mm.
then the Hermann of Carinthia was published. Was Hermann of Carinthia the main focus of your everyday work, or was there something else besides Hermann of Carinthia which you were doing a lot of work on?
Well, I was already doing a lot of work on Adelard,
Okay.
um, and you might say, well, that book is a collection of essays resulting from a conference at the Warburg Institute, but I've written several other books specifically on works of Adelard, like
Okay.
his letters to his nephew and so on. So Adelard has been, well, he's been with me for most of my life. Um, but during that period, so when I was doing my PhD at St John's College, and then finishing the book as a junior research fellow, I had to do a lot of background music, reading and preparation, sort of relearning or learning Arabic, getting to know the whole of the context of the transmission from the late 10th century through to through to the Renaissance, the
Okay.
transmission of Arabic text to the West.
And then there was something breaking up your position because in 1982 you left the Warburg. You
I
went
did.
to went to the University of Sheffield.
Yes, well, my research fellowship at the Warburg was coming to an end, so I had to find another job. Um, and interestingly enough, this job in Sheffield was on Peter Abelard. You'd have just change the second letter of Adelard to turn it round, and you get Abelard. So I went from Adelard to Abelard, and he was interested in Arabic learning, but was not involved to only in a very small degree. But what was important about Abelard, Peter Abelard, was that he really um, was at the forefront of Latin scholarship in the early 12th century, and his works on logic, his works on Aristotelian logic, as well, of course, as his works on theology, um, were really good training in Latin learning of the time, and the kind of learning that people in the schools, coming from the schools, Herman of Carinthia, Robert of Ketton, and so on, would have been subject to. So I thought this was a good sort of complement, as it were, to my studying of the Arabic and the Arabic works and the Latin translations, to get really grounded in Latin education of the
Okay.
time. Mm.
1982, your fellowship with the Warburg ended. How do I have to understand that? It was a time-limited piece
Yeah,
of.
it was a 3 year. Yeah, I think yes. I was in my third year by then, and
So you are on the typical problematic of a human being striving to do an academic career, and then this ended. And how did you find the Sheffield job?
oh, well, it was advertised, but
Oh, okay,
yes,
okay,
no. You're right in thinking that well, most scholarly careers now involve, well, first of all, you've got to get your PhD, but then you have 2 or 3 postdoctoral positions, which are always temporary positions until you're in your mid-30s or even older when you get a permanent position as
okay.
a lecturer, which then can be advanced to a senior lecturer and then a professor and so on. Yeah.
There's a big difference from England to Germany. In Germany, to become a tenure professor, you have to write a Habilitationsschrift,
Yes, yes. You don't have
which is
that. Yeah.
not a PhD. It's something very typical German.
Yes,
You write it for 10 to 15 years, and
yeah.
like Stefan Heilin and Osnabrück did. What is the equivalent in England? Because you don't have the Habilitation, but you certainly have to publish a lot of things to get to be known as electable for professorship.
Yes. Yeah, well, yes, we don't have sort of the kind of strict formalities as you have in Germany. The In my case, actually, it was rather strange because I became a lecturer, a mere lecturer, the lowest teaching position at the Warburg Institute in 1984. Um, and I remained in that position until 1999, I think it was.
Yes.
And then I was elected to be a fellow of the British Academy, which
Yes.
was really quite, well, I was very lucky because I was rather young to be elected a fellow. I mean, most people become fellows when they're in their 50s or 60s. Um, but then there was this lack of parity, as it were, between me being having this elevated distinction of being a fellow of the British Academy and a mere lecturer. So immediately the Warburg Institute decided to make me a professor, which
So we have to thank the Academy side, the British Academy
my
side.
supporters at the British Academy. Yes, yes, yes.
Many thanks to them that you became
Yeah,
the famous Warburg professor.
it was what we call an ad hominem professorship. I
Yeah.
wasn't actually taking the place of another professor who'd retired or moved away from the university.
And this was financed out of the trust of Warburg Institute.
But it was financed by University of London.
Ah, okay. So state money.
I suppose so. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes. Well, yes, but we can go back back to the lectureship because I got the lectureship because at the time Margaret Thatcher, Maggie Thatcher, was Prime Minister. And she introduced what was called new blood lectureships, which were new positions in departments or universities in which there had been no new position for the previous 10 years. They were in a position of stagnation, as it were. But also the lectureships were supposed to be on subjects which were not represented elsewhere. And so the Warburg Institute had the bright idea of advertising a lectureship in Arabic Latin influence or Arabic influence on the West, as well as Hebrew. But in fact, I got the job on the as a title with Arabic influence, um, and the and so it was the government who actually paid for me for my first, well, at least 5 years, and then the university had to take over. Um,
Okay. So this is rather intriguing. And back to your biography. Now you are the, uh, did I call that? You were sort of chair of medieval science and philosophy, research professor in 1999. Would you agree that you had sort of a chair of medieval science and philosophy?
well, it has been called. Maybe it was temporarily called that,
Okay.
but I always
But your main subject is the history of Islamic
it's history.
influences,
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
this
So
thing.
so I would always say professor of the history of Arabic. Yeah. So
Okay.
Islamic influences in
In the time in between, you became affiliated with the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, 1984 to 1985. How
yes.
did that come about? Who, you haven't been, still had the position, you
Well,
had,
sorry, I think I said 1984. I actually took up the job at the Warburg Institute in 1985 after. I mean, this was just another example of, unemployed academics.
what did you do there in Princeton?
Well, my usual research.
Okay.
And
Who paid for you?
well, Princeton. Yes, yes, the
Well,
Institute.
Princeton is a rather high-class elite institution.
Oh, yes.
Did you have somebody there who was your mentor, who wanted you to
Yeah.
have you there?
Yes, I mean, this wasn't the University of Princeton, but this was, well, a very elite
Yeah,
Institute for Advanced Study of Research. And
I think
I don't,
Otto Neugebauer
he was there. He
he
was
was
there.
not only in Providence Brown University, he was also
He
in
was in
Princeton.
Brown. Yes, he probably was in
He was
Princeton for
in
a
both
while.
institutions, wasn't he?
Yes, yes. Because I did spend some time in Brown with Neugebauer and David
Okay.
Berkeley and yeah,
How
yeah.
was your experience with Neugebauer? How did you experience the person?
Well, he was quite old when I first met him, and a very benign elderly man, as it were. All the people in the department had their dogs with them for some reason or other, and he was always giving the dogs titbits. Um, and, I didn't have long conversations with him, I must say, but he was.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Now we have some further positions, but they are later. At what time? I couldn't find out. You have been in the Ludwig-Maximilian University in München as a guest professor, a visiting professor. When was that?
Well, this is entirely to do with the project. No, actually not the first time I was visiting the Department of the History of Science. Or was it?
When was that? Because I couldn't find
Um,
any
oh, I
information
see.
about that stay.
Um, I couldn't say exactly myself because I then became involved with this project called Ptolemaios Arabus et
Hmm.
Latinus, Ptolemy Arabic, the Arabic and Latin Ptolemy. And so I used to go to Munich. Well, I still do go to Munich at least once a year
Oh, okay.
for on a fellowship.
So we leave that open. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we don't want to jump because now I'm intrigued when you became the professor in 1999 because the British Academy had appointed you. What was your main research subject? Were you already working on this large volume, Al-Kabisi, The Introduction to Astrology,
Um,
or was that later?
well, that was no, it was exactly that time. I think it was published in 2000. Um,
2004, 2004. Okay.
2004, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. No, no, no. It was the great, what we call the Great Conjunctions, which was published in 2000 with,
Yes, yes.
yeah, yeah. No, I was very lucky and I'm very grateful for the fact that um, I became involved with two Japanese scholars called Michiyano and Keiji Yamamoto.
And
Well,
how did that come about? Because they are very important for your further works.
they are, yes, yes. Well, to tell you the truth, I had a Japanese girlfriend who became my wife, uh, and,
Okay.
and so that was a good reason for going to Japan. And then I discovered, I think very soon after going there, that my mentor in Brown University, David Pingree, whom I had worked with and who actually we wrote a book together, Hugo of Santala's Liber Aristotelis, um, that one of his students was Michio Yano at this university called the Kyoto Sangyo Daigaku. And so he introduced me to Michio Yano, and so whenever I went to Japan with my girlfriend come wife. I used to work with him and with his student, Keiji Yamamoto. And I was very lucky in getting grants, in fact, from the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science to go there every year. And I was there every year for, until COVID, basically.
Okay.
And now I've been going since then as well. But
So basically, we have to thank your girlfriend and now wife that the really very important editions of Abu Majar's Great Introduction and Alcabitius you wouldn't have done without your girlfriend.
well, I'd always been fascinated by Japan. I might have
Okay.
found my own way there, but it certainly made it easier. To tell you the truth, um, I had two Japanese wives, so
Okay.
the
We won't.
second one, we have children, and so we were taking the children every year, you know.
Okay.
But we had to go to Japan every year, and my excuse and well, my what made me really enjoy myself was that I was able to spend up to 3 months at any time, one time, working with my colleagues in Kyoto Sangyo Daigaku.
Now let's change subjects. There is something uh, we have an American and
Yeah,
we have an Israeli. Um, Shlomo Selah is no longer with us.
yeah,
Um, both are on their own merits. Well, Professor Shlomo Selah as an academic in Israel, uh,
mm,
very important work on Ibn Ezra, and then we have Ben Dykes.
yes,
Um, and in his book, the dedication, the book of the nine judges, the dedication words, I would like to thank the following friends and colleagues in alphabetical order: Charles Burnett, Deborah Holding, and David Just. For our viewers, Deborah Holding is a practicing astrologer, and David Just is a very important researcher in Munich in the project we will talk soon
Yes,
about.
yes, yes.
What about a colleague and friend? Is Benjamin Dyke a friend? Dyke's a friend of yours, or just a colleague, or what is he for you?
Well, I have only met him on a couple of occasions, but I mean, we do correspond, and I very much admire the work that he's doing. I think I would say a colleague rather than a friend, but I mean, his approach, let's say, to well, he has a very specific aim in his academic life, and that is to make available in English translation, well, pretty well all these Arabic texts on astrology, um, largely, well, translated from, first of all, translating them from Latin, but now he knows Arabic very well and he translates them directly from Arabic. So he's doing an immense amount of work with very good results.
So you're saying his translations are all right.
Yes,
Now, how does he do it? Because he produces books in a monthly version.
he does. No, how does he do it?
How does he do it?
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Well, he just must spend a very large amount of his time on this project and has got into a rhythm, maybe. He's got used to the terminology. One thing that he's sometimes criticized for is that he's using a specifically, well, the terminology which is most familiar to professional astrologers. But I mean, the terminology doesn't, or the doctrines don't change over the period of time. So I have no objection to him using a terminology which is familiar um, to our colleagues, the practicing astrologers, uh, but he must be so familiar with the term with the material, and there's so much repetition, one must say, from author to author, that does make it easier for him to translate
Okay.
a lot
Now
more.
coming to Professor Shlomo Seela.
Mm.
Professor Shlomo Seela, deceased unfortunately, he is very important for bringing the works of Ibn Ezra into English. Um,
Specifically, the astrological works, because
yes, the astrological works. And
Ibn Ezra wrote so much
is
help.
was he a reincarnation of Henry Batty of Mechelen?
Well, I suppose you could say so. Yes, yes.
It's strange.
Um,
If you compare the two biographies, it's really intriguing. The Henry Batty of Mechelen in the medieval times, translating Ibn Ezra from Hebrew, I believe. Yes,
yes, from Hebrew.
from
Yeah.
Hebrew into Latin,
Yes,
and now Shlomo Sela translating the Hebrew texts into English.
yes.
What would you say, Ibn Ezra? How important is Ibn Ezra in your view for the old astrology of the medieval times?
Well, Ibn Ezra, I mean, he was well. One thing which is interesting about that is that he incorporates astrology, or he sees astrology as being part well, of universal learning. I mean, he's not just an astrologer. He knows his astrology very well, and we can trace his sources in Arabic. I mean, he was even reading some Latin sources. And he certainly was interested in the practice of astrology. But for him, astrology is part of a larger body of knowledge which any wise man should acquire. Um, and on the one hand, but on the other hand, astrology was key, as it were, to many of the other sciences. And so his commentaries on the Bible, which are his best known works, are full of astrological references and astrological explanations of things that are going on in the Jewish Bible. Um, so he is. He's not just an astrologer, let's say, but he's a very learned man. And as you have already hinted, his works became, and not immediately, but they became very important, especially in the late 14th century onwards, through translations, first of all into French, and then Barter. I'm not sure if he knew Hebrew, but certainly he was translating from the French versions of Hegel le Juif, as was Pietro da Barno and some other people. And so we have multiple Latin versions, and these were printed in the early period of printing in the the early 16th century, and became staple works on astrology for the rest of the early modern period. So very important. And Shlomo Seller, I mean, one should say that not only does he know the languages and the subject matter very, very well and translate from Hebrew, but also towards the end of his life, he was translating those works of Abraham ibn Ezra which only survive in Latin. Um, so just as Dykes taught himself Arabic in order to increase the range of works that he was
Thick
editing,
books like
and very
this.
thick one.
Yeah, yeah.
So Seller taught himself Latin in order to continue to produce thick books on Abraham ibn Ezra. Hmm.
What do you think of the critique of Ibn Ezra, who was critiquing Abu Mashar? You know Abu Mashar very well.
Yeah, yeah.
What's your opinion? Was Ibn Ezra sort of deviating from serious discussion, or was he right in critiquing Abu Mashar?
Well, maybe um, one can see a pattern here because Abu Mashar, we think of him as being a consummate astrologer, so knowledgeable in astrology. But he says he criticizes astrologers, saying that he himself is a philosopher, not an astrologer. But
Oh,
he
okay.
criticizes astrologers for some of their beliefs. And this continues with Abraham ibn Ezra, who is criticizing Abu Bakr as an astrologer, who gets
Okay.
it, who he thinks that it's all about mean motions or exact or mean
Yeah.
positions or exact positions of the planets.
Yeah, do you
Uh,
have an opinion on this subject, the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn and the mean positions
the
in the
mean
tables?
positions.
Um,
Yes.
what's your opinion of Abu Mashar's positions on that? Because it's strange to take mean positions instead of taking
The true positions.
the
Yeah.
astronomical positions.
Yes.
What
Yes.
what's the rationale of not taking Jupiter Saturn on a specific degree when they conjunct? And sometimes
Yeah.
it's more than one conjunction, retrograde and coming back and
Yes.
so on.
Yes.
What's your opinion? Why do you have a feeling of, well, you can't know because Abu Mashar is long gone. We
Yes.
can't look into his head. But what was the
Yes.
motivation which you speculate? What might have been his motivation to do that?
Well, maybe he was just taking a shortcut in.
You mean, or was it a problem of the tables in those days?
Well, I mean, the first thing you find in the tables is the mean positions, and then you've got to do some calculation from the mean positions and
Yes, yes.
position. But um, um, Abu Mashar, in spite of the hugeness of his volume, gives the impression of not being particularly interested in the niceties of mathematics. I mean, he doesn't want.
Okay.
He's not so keen on.
That sounds like a promising explanation,
Whereas
yes.
Ibn Ezra, I mean, he wrote a famous book all about arithmetic, the Sefer Maspa. Mm.
Okay, changing topics. We'll come back to this later.
Yeah.
there is a development in the religious science.
Mm.
We have Professor Burnett in London in the history of science, which is
Mm.
Warburg, and then we have the field of religious science, and we have this Habilitationsschrift by Dr. Schöner, and we have the Professor Kocke von Stuckrad, a German guy
Of
in
course.
Groningen who comes from religious science. Did you ever encounter more people from this other field, religious science, when talking about history of astrology, or are these two minority people?
Well, the one advantage of being at the Warburg Institute is that we do not have boundaries, subject boundaries. So my students, my PhD students, for example, they don't have to say, well, I'm a theologian or I am a philosopher or I'm a historian of science. Um, if there is a single um, title to a a Warburg PhD. It's in combined historical studies for some reason. But so I never have the experience of being with a so-called theologian or being with a so-called historian of science because my students are the students of the Warburg Institute and they ask the questions which are relevant to the subject that they're studying. Um, I suppose it would be different if I were in a theology department, faculty in Hanover or Nuremberg or whatever, where you would be always talking to people who are specifically interested in theological questions.
Did you ever meet professors of religious science on your traveling in your life?
Uh, well,
In Toronto, for example, they have a large faculty of religious science.
they have several. I was in the Pontifical Institute, which is supposed to
Yeah.
be Catholic, I suppose, but
So you didn't in your life personally, you didn't have important contacts with professors of religious science in your life.
no, no.
Okay, okay, good. Now we have another interesting institution, the Hermetic Amsterdam, Professor
Yeah.
Wouter Hanegraaff. What do you know about this institution?
Well, quite a lot
The
because I know the people who teach there. Um,
did you ever go there?
well, no, but I've been to the library, which was what a Bibliotheca Hermetica
Yeah.
Philosophica.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes,
I've been
yes,
there
which was
during
then
the.
taken over by the center. Yes,
Yes, yes.
but
So
private
it
library.
wasn't a close collaboration with the Hermetic Amsterdam people.
Yes, yes, a very fine library covering every aspect of Hermeticism. Mm.
What's your opinion on this development of academic research in esotericism? We have another institution, the chair of esotericism at the University of
Yes.
Exeter. If you take these two chairs, Wouter Hanegraaff and Nicholas Godfrey Clark, unfortunately deceased, is that something which where you were involved in, or was it separate from your work?
I can't say I was involved in. No, I mean I was present, as it were, and maybe gave some advice when the Institute of in Amsterdam was first set up, um, and through a private donation, as you probably know.
Yes.
And I think it has proved that it has fulfilled that it has filled an important lacuna in university teaching. It still remains the largest or the certainly the most important center for the teaching of um, magic here designed specifically as Hermeticism. Um, the institute in Exeter has had sort of mixed fortunes, certainly with the after the death of Nicholas Goodrich Clark. I mean, it sort of disappeared, but then they've tried to um, revitalize it recently. but it doesn't have so much of a profile as being a center, a separate center for the study of magic or esotericism. Um, but I mean, going back to what your previous question, it has always been difficult to know into which faculty someone who is an expert on esoteric philosophy should fit. Sometimes it is theology. Um, I think Matthew um, um, what's he called? Um, Melvin Kulke is in a theology faculty. Mm.
Okay, second, another topic.
Oh, there's Kepler College, yes.
Yes, how about your involvement in Kepler College? Any connections you had, or did you just
No,
watch it from afar?
I just watched it from afar, yes. Mm.
Okay. And then the cultural astronomy and astrology in Wales, Lampeter, Wales, Trinity, St. David. This is something different because you have been cooperating with the Trinity people by a conference from Mashallah to Kepler theory and
Yes,
practice in
yes,
medieval and Renaissance
yeah,
astrology. I
yeah.
think, yeah, I have this here.
There we are. Yes.
There we go. This was organized. What was your involvement in that conference, and how did you see what is going on in Lampeter with Nicolas Campion and his people?
Well, of course, I know very well my co-editor, Dorian Greenbaum. The conference itself took place in the Warburg Institute, and so there was no need, and I've never been to Lampeter. And in fact, this course, as you probably know, is entirely online anyway, so nobody goes to Lampeter or needs to go to Lampeter. Um, and um, and like other courses, it depends very much on the strength, the character of one person, and that is in this case Nicholas Campion. Um,
Is my impression correct? If he dies, this will fade out?
it may well do, yes, it may well do. Or if he retires, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, that is a problem.
Yes, I mean, Shlomo Seller, of course, his professional job was in computer sciences, and his work on Ibn Ezra was just a sideline.
Yeah. Okay. Change of topics. IKGF University Erlangen-Nürnberg.
Yes,
What
yes.
do you know about that?
Well, I was a member, a fellow of that for a while. I visited maybe 3 times. And this is another example of a very worthwhile project, which had a limit, a limited tenure. So after I think it was as much as 12 years. It just finished, and of course, it doesn't
Okay.
exist anymore. But whilst it was there, I mean, it did fulfill a very important role, taking esotericism, occult sciences, well, in respect to specifically to predicting the future, to a global level. And at first, it was just Western Europe and China. Then they filled in the gap with Indian or Sanskrit and the Middle Eastern as well. So, mm.
So that's another example.
Yes,
A
the
pity that it,
Ptolemaios Arabus and Latinus, on the other hand,
that is the promising future.
that is promising because they were from the very beginning. It was a project. They were given, 25 years, um, which is a long time, and a very, very generous grant, which was going to continue for 25 years, which would be until the retirement age, if not even beyond the retirement age, of David Joost and Benno van Dalen, the two leaders of the project. And they have really proved well. It's very that it has been very well worthwhile funding such a project because of the what they've produced in terms of editions and translations, catalogs of manuscripts, catalogs of works, and so on. It's a very lively institute, but no teaching. Um,
Yeah.
mm.
So we have a little bit of Italy, France, and Spain. Do you have contacts to these countries? And Portugal. I
Well,
missed.
I know Portugal, yes, with Luis Ribeiro.
I have to add Portugal on the title.
Well, the Portuguese would not be happy to be incorporated into Spain, as it were. No.
Yes, I would agree on that. Now, there is an article on Reddit about astrology is back in university. People can read it if they click the link. And we have, so basically what we have today is Munich, this Ptolemaic project, and we have Portugal, which is flourishing sort of. How do you evaluate the future of the Helena Avila seminar series hosted by the University of Lisbon Center in I can't pronounce this in
Yes,
Portuguese.
yes, yes.
How do you see this project, and has Luis Ribeiro a chance to become a professor there?
Well, I really hope so. Um, Again, we're dealing with personalities rather than institutions here. Um, that's this the study of astrology in Portugal is due, well, partly, I suppose, to the support of the professor of history of science, Henrique Leitao, whose students have been Helena Avelar and Luis Ribeiro. Um, but both Avelar and Ribeiro, as you say, they don't have permanent positions or didn't have permanent positions in the university, but they were just so active in their research that they attracted people to Lisbon. And there's a well, one result is that they have a very active Arabic reading class in astrology and related sciences. Um, and but it would be nice certainly to be able to look forward to the future with somebody dedicated to the subject actually among the teaching staff.
So that is a question for the future, how the Renaissance
Yes,
will
yes,
continue to flower, or
yes. Again,
if the lifetime of your teaching
yes.
is sort of representative for the flowering of the research on astrology in history, and it's coming to an end. Could that be?
Yes, I think, as this article probably says, um, astrology at least um, has been accepted as an academic discipline with universities. So you don't have to make excuses to write a PhD, which involves some aspect of astrology, and many people do nowadays. That is different, of course, to saying that, well, there really should be a lectureship in astrology within a department of theology or a department of history or science. That would take longer to establish. But at least astrology is regarded as being, well, one could even say, as scientific in pre-modern times as medicine or as agriculture um, or other subjects which have a practical side.
If we look at this conference, which was held in the Warburg Institute, continuities and disruptions
Yes.
between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, there's this small booklet. Um, Now let's get into the everyday work of your professorship. Proceedings held at the Warburg. Now somebody has to organize it. How many people are under your, well, you are the boss, and how many people are under you in your professorship? Do you have three to
No,
four?
no, nobody. But what we do have, I mean, we're quite a small organization, but we do have secretarial staff, and we have someone who's specifically the director or the manager of events. So if we want to have a conference, as we did a month ago on Ibn Arabi, John Millington very much takes it upon himself to organize, to do all the organization. I mean,
So how
um,
about this one? Who had the idea?
Well, that was quite a minor conference. I think that was oh yes, that's interesting. Yes, to know who actually took part. It's some time ago now. Um, but once you have well, once you have an idea, you have to apply to the Warburg Institute, saying, "I want a conference on this subject around about these dates and so on," and it's got to be accepted by the conference committee or the
So
event
basically, we are
committee.
talking. Did you apply for this
Oh
conference?
yes, 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 yeah.
So you wrote a letter. I want to have this conference. Please do the work.
Yes, that's right. Yes, yes. But of course, I have to continue to do the work of the drawing up the speakers and being in contact with the speakers and eventually, as this book proves, after the conference, you've got to publish the conference proceedings.
So how much time consuming is preparation of a conference like that?
Oh, it is quite time consuming. Yeah, yeah. Um,
Okay.
and this was under the auspices of the Fédération Internationale pour Study of the Renaissance, I think. Oh, and there, oh, I see. And then we have even
Who are
a
these
photograph
people?
of all the students.
Here is Helena Avila, and here is our
Yeah,
guest.
yes, yes.
Are these people PhD graduates
Yeah, this is
because of their heads?
this commemorates, or this is the day of the graduation um, of the MA students and the PhD students. So
Ah, okay,
yeah.
okay. So Warburg Institute, it's originally a German Jew in Hamburg, and now it's in London. How much of the Warburg, of the Abbey Warburg tradition is alive today?
Well, the entire tradition is alive. Uh,
Okay.
no, the point is that Abbé Warburg belonging to the banking family of the Warburgs in Hamburg. Um, he became fascinated by the history of, well, we could say the history of art, but everything to do, or everything that led into the history of art, and started building up this very large library, personal library, private library in his house. Then he had to build an extra library in his garden and so on. And then, because of the Jewishness of himself and the people who looked after the library, the whole thing had to be moved to London in 1938, and proceeded to be housed until in 1952 a special building was built for it, but mainly to contain this library built up by Abbé Warburg, which had a very specific organization, a very a special organization, and it has grown organically, as it were, from its very beginning, and it's continuing to grow, but still based on the ideas, one could say, the ideas of the divisions of knowledge of Abbé Warburg himself. There's been, and one could say, there has been a continuity with its development since the time of our book. No big disruption. I mean, even the moving of the library from Hamburg to London was done integrally. I mean, all the books were put onto two boats, and the boats brought them all over to London. Um, and brought a lot of the scholars who were associated with the library to London as well. Um, and we still have retain a close connection with what was the house of Abbé Warburg in Hamburg, which is also the history of art part of Hamburg University.
For the viewers, you can learn about the history of the Warburg Institute. In one of these informations, I was speculating about the floor your office is. Are you on the third floor?
I'm on the fourth floor now. Yes,
Oh, but you have been on the third.
I've been on the third.
Yeah,
Yes.
because that was my speculation. That where you should belong. Okay, for the German viewers, Professor Burnett is well known in the library Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
Yes.
but it doesn't open. Well, okay. Now we have 87 positions, so there's a lot of books to be lent out by Professor Burnett, and the books I was showing come from the Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz Bibliothek. And we have a film list. I produced a film list where the viewers can click on, and then we have this Astra Project interviews with you. There's this
Mm.
one, and then there is your lecture, European Discovery of Arab Culture, and we have uh, Astrology, Talismans and Images. Then we have the Academy for Cultural Diplomacy. So people can watch all those videos and also some information about Neugebauer and David
Oh,
Pingree,
degree there too. Yes,
and
yes,
and
indeed.
your
Yeah.
lecture in Portugal on the conference of the Astra conference. Uh, that is for viewers to look at. And then, of course, we have the list of publications, which is unbelievable long, and we won't talk about all that. Now, let's in the final sections, your publication of this. This is, in my opinion, unbelievable important for the scene of astrologers and the astrological communities, because we can compare it with the translation of Benjamin Dykes and see the differences and see how much work goes into an academic translation and edition. How many years would you calculate? 10 to 15 years work in that book?
Well, maybe 5 years. Um,
Okay, five
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Okay.
Because there was a progression of the small introduction, first of all, of Adelaide Bath, and then the great conjunctions, and then Al-Kabisi, and finally this one. So over a period of 20 years altogether, I suppose. Um, I would be very interested to see someone's comparison of the two translations of the.
Yes. Well, I have both. I have both. This is from the library, and I have the other one I bought, the other one from Benjamin Dykes. So I do some
Yes, yeah.
comparison. So for the final point, the Astra project. Do you remember how it came into life?
Well, I mean, this is the same Astro project as was started by Elena Avila and
Yes, yes, yes.
Luis Ribeiro. Yes,
Was
yes.
it your input, or did they come with this idea to you?
They came with this idea to me. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I recommend all these videos, which are with colleagues of Professor Burnett
Yeah,
and, of course,
yeah.
himself. So this is the ASA project. So final question, did I miss to ask something important?
Well, we've covered a very wide range of subjects, I must say.
Yes, yes, we did. But
Uh,
did I miss something which you would like to talk about?
I don't think so. No, no.
So we can finish the video.
Yes, okay.
So many thanks to Professor Burnett for taking the time to talk with us, and the viewers for coming to watch this video. And I stopped the recording. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, goodbye to everybody then, and hello to everybody
Yes, thank you. I
who might
stopped the
actually watch
recording.
this.
Okay.
Yes, yes.